There are, as I always say, if progressives didn't have lies, if Democrats didn't have lies, they'd have nothing to say at all. And they lie, therefore, all the time. Here's an example. As of mid-2025, mid-year this year, this guy writes, Washington, D.C.'s violent crime rate has dropped 26% year to date compared to 2024. That's a huge drop. Homicides are down 13%. Robberies are down 29%. Assaults are down 19%. This aligns with national trends in homicides. And then compared to peer cities, they're not doing so bad. DC homicide rate, according to this data, 20 out of 100,000. That's half the rate Harmeet Dillon shared with us. Chicago's 14, LA's 5, New York is 2 out of 100,000, still higher, but it's improving fast. Some other urban centers are going up. Houston's up 21%. Well, that makes DC seem not so bad. What are we all worried about? Relax. It's not a problem. Well, here's why it is a problem. All this data is cooked. The DC crime data is completely cooked. They've been falsifying it. Just today, a DC police commander suspended, accused of changing crime statistics. These are senior level commanders. And by the way, I'm not going to cover this for this show because it goes into too much detail. This commander, there's more than one of these going on in DC right now, but a white senior officer in the DC Police Department filed a complaint that he was being treated in a racist manner because he's a white guy and he was being passed over for promotion in favor of black candidates by the black management of the DC Police Department. So he filed a federal lawsuit for racism. They immediately took his wife, who's also a police officer in the DC Police Department, has a senior level of status, and they assigned her to midnight shift in one of the most dangerous parts of the city, obviously in retaliation for his complaint. His wife also happens to be white. So this guy, now that he's facing this kind of retaliation against his wife and other forms of retaliation against him, they're putting papers in his files now saying he's not doing a good job. Again, all retaliation. He's decided to leak the reality that the DC Police Department has been cooking the books on their crime statistics. Now, I'm sure he was doing it too. Everybody was doing it, but he's decided to disclose it now in retaliation for the retaliation he's receiving for having filed a racial grievance with the police department, with the city. So all these stats we're seeing are worthless. They're completely cooked. Here's my buddy Jack Posobiec writes, the DC police commander placed on leave over deliberately falsifying crime data. I don't know if that's the same guy I was just talking about or a different one, but there's no question that the data here is cooked. Fraternal Order of Police Chairman Greg Pemberton said, when our members, our officers, respond to the scene of a felony offense where there's a victim reporting a felony occurred, inevitably there will be a lieutenant or a captain that will show up on that scene and direct those officers to take a report for a lesser offense. So instead of taking a report for a shooting or a stabbing or a carjacking, all obviously serious felonies, they will order that officer to take a report for a mere theft or an injured person or a felony assault, which is not the same type of classification. And by the way, urban centers have been doing this my entire adult life, maybe not at this level of intensity. But for example, the crime of attempted murder is almost never charged in America anymore. It used to be common, but they don't like attempted murder charges on the record books. It makes the city look bad. So they mitigate those down. Now they call them aggravated batteries. Well, what is an aggravated battery, really? A battery is the use of force upon another person unlawfully. An aggravated battery is the use of deadly force upon another person, force reasonably likely to cause death or serious bodily injury. If it's reasonably likely to cause death, how is that any different than attempted murder? Luck? The only difference between aggravated battery and attempted murder in reality is that the quality of trauma care has gone up in America. That instead of those people dying from being shot or stabbed, they're surviving because our urban hospitals have gotten good at treating gunshot wounds because of the demographic fatigue. So much fatigue. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Charlie Kirk here. Here's an important story, he writes. Everyone is missing. It's just flagged for me by someone in the know. When President Trump floated the idea of seizing federal control over Washington, D.C. to stop crime, the press raced to point out that crime is falling. Crime is falling. Residents, however, report otherwise, but the stats and the science suggest that the city is safer than it's been in years. Just one problem. At this very moment, a D.C. police commander has been suspended, getting investigated for allegedly tweaking crime stats to make them look lower than reality. And as the quote I just shared with you, it's not just this one commander. Lieutenants and captains are showing up at crime scenes, telling officers to downgrade the offenses. It's the entire senior officer levels of the department. And D.C.'s police union says his suspension is just the tip of the iceberg. The union says its investigation has revealed that cops all over the city are routinely pressured by command to downgrade felonies so they don't appear on the Metropolitan Police Department, the DC Police Department, or FBI's violent crime database statistics. How much of the crime drop is just progressive lies? Democrat machine politicians lying to the public. All of it. Does anybody believe that violent crime in D.C. has dropped 25%, even 15%? What would have driven that? It's not more effective criminal legislation. The legislation they've adopted is softer on crime. So it's not that they've locked a bunch of bad guys up. By the way, you could achieve a 25% drop in violent crime in D.C. in a year, like a Thanos snap. You know how you do that? You grab the guys committing the violent crime and you put them in prison for long periods of time. Invariably, it's a small minority of a population that's committing the violent crime. And then there's leak over, there's the broken windows effect. People see violence, they decide they can get away with crime too. So there's more thefts, there's more drug dealing, there's more everything. But the core, the catalyst, tends to be a relatively small number of people who are committing most of the crime and the most violent crime. And when you take that catalyst out of the community by putting it in prison, you see dramatic drops in violent crime. That's what Giuliani did in New York City. Saved New York City from David Dinkins, the mayor before him. Happens to be a black guy. When crime in New York City was at DC-like levels. Thousands of people a year were being murdered in New York City when I lived there. And Giuliani saved the city. Of course, now it's reverting back. And Trump is beginning to take steps. Jack Posobiec again, breaking Trump orders federal law enforcement agencies to deploy to D.C. streets. This guy writes, if the cleanup holds, the ripple effect could be huge. Lower crime, stronger economy, safer streets. It could even shift D.C.'s politics over time. The question is whether it's a real fix. Well, that is a legitimate question. I trust Trump. Actions speak louder than words, and Trump's actions are very compelling. But yes, it has to have real effect. Here's a news report on this. Federal officers have arrived in D.C., taking over law enforcement responsibility, at least in part, from the Metropolitan Police Department that's under home rule in D.C. Let's see what this news clip has to say.
President Trump, it's not a secret how he feels about violence in the city, and it's resulted in this. We are outside of Union Station this morning because the White House says you can now expect to see more police presence in touristy areas of D.C. In fact, there were several.
Did you see what that car said on the door? It says police on the hood, right? What's on the door? Amtrak. President Trump is putting the Amtrak, the Federal Railroad Police, on the streets of Washington, D.C. Amtrak.
Areas of DC. In fact, there were several things announced by the White House yesterday. Check it out. For the next 7 days, and potentially longer than that, you can expect to see federal officers in marked units patrolling what the Trump administration is calling high traffic tourist areas and other hotspots. We are not sure exactly what those hotspots are. The increase.
By the way, almost all the violent crime, I shouldn't say almost all, but the large majority of violent crime in DC either occurs in or is committed by people who reside within about a 5 square block area in DC. That's how easy it would be to all but eliminate violent crime in DC. Just target the bad actors in that 5 square block area. And you will transform DC from one of the most violent cities in America and the world into one of the safest national capitals in the world. It's that easy. You just have to have the political will to do it. Thanks for watching this highlight segment of our full-length Law of Self-Defense live stream. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to give us a like and subscribe for more expert analysis on politics, law, and how to be hard to convict. And to watch the full-length episode of this show, just click right here. Stay safe.